All right, my second topic for this morning's Breer Report. My most anticipated game of the weekend isn't being played on the weekend. It's being played on Monday night. And that's the third edition of Harbaugh versus Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh still does not have a win over his older brother. John Harbaugh won a Thanksgiving night game between the Ravens and Niners in 2011. And of course, won the much ballyhooed Harbaugh, Super Bowl 47. The Ravens won the world championship that night, edging out Jim Harbaugh's Niners. So 12 years later, here we are. We got Harbaugh versus Harbaugh again, and two really good teams playing against one another. We know what the Ravens are, what the Ravens have been since John Harbaugh has been there, notwithstanding what happened on Sunday against the Steelers. Is still one of the best teams in the AFC, one of the best teams in the NFL, as it has been so many times over John Harbaugh's 17 years in charge. And now we have Jim Harbaugh coming with the Chargers in his first year and bringing a Chargers team that's playing with identity, that looks like a Jim Harbaugh team, that's right there in the playoff race at 7-4. And I can't wait for this one. I think this is a game where we're going to see the Ravens in position to bounce back and see how Lamar Jackson looks coming off of that loss to the Steelers, how the Ravens defense looks coming off of that loss to the Steelers. We have, of course, the Jim versus John matchup, which, interestingly enough, like, I'm told that Jim hasn't really addressed it with his coaches and players. He always tries to put the focus on the team. I think it's implied in that building. Like, we all know this is a big one for a lot of people here. But Jim's never going to make it about that. It's always going to be about the team for Jim. So hasn't really been a big topic of conversation internally for the Chargers this week. And this is actually a reunion for a lot of people. The general manager of the Chargers, Joe Ortiz, the defensive coordinator of the Chargers, Jesse Minter, the assistant general manager of the Chargers, Chad Alexander, the offensive coordinator of the Chargers, Greg Roman. All those guys are former Ravens guys. And that, to me, is maybe the most interesting piece of the actual X's and O's of this game. In that the defensive systems, like, these offenses have practiced against these defenses, right? Like, these offenses have gone on a day-to-day basis against these defenses. And this is the defensive scheme. Zach Orr running it in Baltimore and Jesse Minter running it there in Los Angeles, that so many teams want to replicate across the NFL. Well, these offenses have had a chance to see it on a day-to-day basis. Jesse Minter, of course, was in Baltimore in 2018, 2019, 2020. He got to practice against Lamar Jackson. So what's he going to have for Lamar Jackson? There's just so many interesting elements to how this game could play out. This also could have an effect on seeding down the line. If the Ravens make the playoffs, but they don't win the division, if Pittsburgh winds up winning that division, and Pittsburgh's in the lead in that division right now, well, then how the seeding shakes out, wildcard seeding shakes out, could be dictated by what happens in this game. So it's an important game, a lot of great storylines. And this is, again, like, sort of the style, the styles of play, like these two very similar styles of play converging. And I can remember having a conversation with Jim Harbaugh before that Super Bowl in 2012. It was early 2013, but the 2012 season. And I was asking him about how that distinctive style of play, how it shows up in John's teams and it shows up in Jim's teams. And, I remember Jim pausing when I asked him about it. And, I remember his comment was, well, if somebody says that the Niners play like the Ravens, then that would be a really big compliment for everybody in this building. And I still think he thinks that way. And that's implied with, again, that's implied with all the Ravens people that he has in his building right now, that the general manager is a Ravens guy, that the offensive coordinator is a Ravens guy, that the defensive coordinator is a Ravens guy, like that all of those guys have seen Baltimore from the inside out and now have a chance to go in and build another version of the Harbaugh family system. It's incredibly fascinating. I think it's going to be a really entertaining game. The only thing that's disappointing to me, you go back to the top of the show on this, is that it's going to be played on artificial turf in a dome. It does feel like Harbaugh versus Harbaugh should be played on a grass field in the Midwest somewhere under a slate gray sky. But I love everything else about it. Can't wait for Monday night. That should be a really good one.